Shout out to Bring Our Q, Julius, you legend. We're going to do a joint interview, yeah? Yeah, we'll do a joint interview, Julius. Thanks for the support. You're a legend. From your girls, Raven and Ellie.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It was announced earlier this week that Ellie Scotney versus Melli Flores has been rescheduled for the MVP UK debut in April. For what is an all-female card that Terry Harper and Caroline Dubois will be headlining, the chief support. Scotney versus Flores that we've already discussed on a good number of occasions here on the channel. I believe it was originally supposed to go down on the undercard of Jake Paul versus Anthony Joshua. Ellie Scotney sports an unblemished record of 11 wins with no losses and no draws, no recorded knockouts, but still one of the best around. Although lacking knockout power, Ellie Scotney's boxing acumen is really something, because she takes these fighters that are a lot more experienced than she is, chews them up and spits them out, and makes it look easy. The running theme with all of her fights. Whereas Melli, WBA champion of Mexico, sports a professional record of 13 wins with 1 loss and 1 draw, 4 knockouts, having never been knocked out in 15 professional bouts. One of the more aggressive, one of the more dangerous punchers at the weight. Noticeably shorter and more compact than Ellie Scotney. Ellie will have height and length over Melli, whereas Melli is more short and stout.
This is my handle. This is my spout.
When I get all steamed up, hear me shout, tip me over and pour me out. Last in action, in May of last year, opposite the ring, then champion Nazarena Romero, who Melli beat by way of a split decision for what was the WBA title. It's the only fight that Melli had last year. Currently on a 5-fight winning streak, having been in there with some of the best fighters anywhere at or around these weights. Mariana Juarez, Yuli Hangaluna, Nazarena Romero, now Ellie Scotney. Ellie was last in action in July of last year, and if not for the injury, she would have saw action 3 times last year. Once in January, again in July, then again towards the end of the year. But I believe it was Ellie that suffered an injury in camp that ended up delaying this undisputed title fight, the first of its kind. There's never been an undisputed women's super bantamweight champion, so this will be a night of firsts. Whoever emerges the victor in this fight will, in effect, be making history.
The fighter's strengths.
With Melli Flores, a come-forward pressure fighter who's persistent and durable, what you see is what you get, because she's a hard woman to discourage. And Ellie Scotney, not being a knockout merchant, not having that much power,
Melli's gonna try to stay on top of her all night. If Ellie can't get her respect, if she can't discourage her, this could be the most difficult fight of Ellie's career.
To the eye, anybody would look at Melli's boxing and Ellie's boxing and come to the conclusion that Ellie is the more skilled fighter of the two in terms of X's and O's. But what Melli lacks in fundamentals, she makes up for in come-forward aggression, throwing caution to the wind.
That makes her dangerous.
Albeit limited. Approaching a fight with her, one thing you know is that she's gonna try to drop bombs and she's gonna take chances, so you've got to be ready.
Round 1, fight.
Ellie's strength is that she's good at so many things. Even if she doesn't have knockout power, she is adaptable.
Fight on the inside, fight on the outside, fight on the front foot, fight on the back foot, on the move.
Showing a great variety of punches, knowing what to throw and when and where.
And how.
Having been in there with some of the very best fighters anywhere at or around these weights, a former champion in Maria Cecilia Roman,
then IBF champion Shernika Johnson, then WBO champion Sigolene Lafarve, then WBC champion Yemi Mercado. Melli Flores presents the last remaining puzzle piece to the super bantamweight crown. Ellie means to collect it.
This fight might look something like the Miyamoto fight that Ellie had in January of last year. Miyamoto, an aggressive customer, a hard puncher, just like Melli. See a situation where Ellie Scotney's going to fight this fight on the balls of her feet, picking Melli Flores off as Melli tries to barrel forward, crashing the pocket. In effect, walking into punches and missing her own.
Melli swings pretty wide enough that I see Ellie Scotney slipping, bobbing, weaving under her punches, making her miss, making her pay, and in effect, making her tired.
Because that's the consequence of missing punches. It costs twice as much energy to throw a punch and miss as if you actually hit something.
If you hit nothing often enough, you're gonna get tired. And when you get tired, you're easier to hit. The punches you take cause more damage.
I like Ellie Scotney to win. I like Ellie to win a points decision in a fight where maybe things get off to a rocky start, but she starts to pull away and starts to dominate in the middle and towards the end.
Scotney on points is the pick.
Now for a word from boxing insider Rick Glacier, who we haven't heard from for a while since his Twitter account was hacked. He's been posting his insights on social media, and he, like the rest of us, is reacting to news of Floyd Mayweather's bombshell lawsuit. He says Floyd Mayweather Jr. has filed a lawsuit against Showtime and then Showtime Sports president Stephan Espinoza for reputedly not paying Mayweather $340 million in earnings because of fraud, plus punitive damages.
Where did he post this?
On Facebook, where all the old people hang out. So, I have been fully vindicated. In that lawsuit, it states that Al Haymon committed fraud, but is not named in the suit, as Al Haymon has already settled out of court for a substantial amount of money and will probably have to testify against Showtime and Stephan Espinoza.
So he rolled over on Stephan to save his own ass.
According to Rick Glacier, he did. I had said for years that Haymon was a bad guy and was playing all kinds of games with the fighters' money. I am fully vindicated, and so he is.
Now, I speculated when news first broke of the lawsuit that the reason Al might not be mentioned in the lawsuit is because he's already covered his own tracks. He's already protected himself in whatever arrangement he reached with Floyd.
Whatever contracts Floyd signed, whatever deal Floyd made on paper would prohibit him from going after Al. That's what I thought. Maybe it's this way, maybe it's another.
Maybe.
It's not up for discussion, is that we were right about Al Haymon. Myself, Rick Glacier, several others who took a lot of online abuse for suggesting that Al Haymon was a grifter, that he was misappropriating not only Floyd Mayweather's money, but a lot of the fighters' money at the PBC and the network's money.
Yeah, I called him a fucking thief. Turns out that's what he was.
But for doing that, I got called every name in the book, but Adam was accused of being a bigot and being a racist, that the only reason I was going after Al constantly was because of the color of his skin.
And not his shady business practices, which the dumb dullards online were too stupid to interpret.
I could see it a mile away, but they couldn't, because to them, Al Haymon would present as a sort of fairy godmother, fairy godfather, the boxing fairy.
Here to put some money in your pocket and rub your belly and give you hugs and cuddles and make everything right.
The boxing fairy that they claimed does everything in his power to look out for the fighters. What he was really doing was robbing Peter to pay Paul.
With other people's money.
Harvard-educated failure who couldn't hack it in the music industry and apparently couldn't do it in boxing either.
Couldn't hack it in corporate America.
Decided to use his Harvard education to swindle his own people out of their money, and for calling him out on it.
I gotta be the bad guy for being ahead of the curve.
Not buying into the whole black excellence bullshit that turned out to be bullshit because Al Haymon was just another con man, like there are a lot of con men in the sport of boxing, which is likely what compelled him to get into this sport in the first place. He knew he'd fit right in. Most of these guys are morons anyway.
All you gotta do is start talking that brother this, brother that bullshit.
There's a group of folk that are gonna automatically eat that bullshit up. Floyd Mayweather at his side and whatever success they had together made for a very convincing sales pitch to a lot of fighters that whatever he did for Floyd, he can do for me. But what did he do for Floyd? Steal $340 million of his dollars? To do what with it? Keep his failed experiment afloat? You know the PBC hasn't been around all that long? It was founded in 2014 and launched in 2015, run by some of the most inept people in boxing because you started off with $500 million. It's not even counting what you got from the networks like Fox and Showtime annually as part of your network deals. How much money did Al Haymon manage to fuck off?
What could he have done with that much money? What did he do with it?
Take some of it for himself, maybe made some bad investments with it, sent it to an offshore account?
I don't know. The mind wanders.
But I don't actually think he's that bright. Where some might assume he's got a rather large nest egg somewhere, I'm inclined to believe that he used all of that money, misappropriated it, to keep the PBC afloat. Boxing fans don't realize how expensive it is to do a single boxing show, let alone several, throughout the calendar year. And if none of those shows are turning over a profit, you've got to make up the difference somehow. His initial plan, buying time on networks, that costed a lot of money. And when you're paying fighters in excess of their market value in tandem with other operational costs, you're going to burn through a lot of cash very quickly.
People hear about this lawsuit and automatically think Al stole the money to keep it for himself.
Where it's just as likely that he misappropriated the money trying to keep his failed experiment afloat because it was a cockamamie plan to begin with.
A stupid one.
Yeah, let me steal all of these fighters from Oscar, bring them over to my PBC where I'm gonna use other people's money to pay them more than they're worth.
More than they can generate.
Now, what about those business practices sound sustainable so that when things start to go sideways and the money starts to dry up, you start stealing money from them to keep this money pit of yours going?
How much money from how many people got poured into Al Haymon's PBC for the big fat fucking nothing they got in return?
How much?
$340 million from Floyd, $500 million from Waddle and Reed, and all that network money year after year after year.
How much?
They've got Fundora versus Thurman set to go down later on this year, and not being given a budget from Amazon Prime like they were getting on Showtime, how the fuck are they paying for that show?
How have they been paying for any of the shows they've been doing on Amazon Prime if Amazon isn't giving them a budget? Whose money are they fucking off now? That is Al Haymon's real talent. His ability to convince people to give him money he then fucks off.
I don't even view him as a good thief or a good con man because a good con man knows how to get away with it.
A good thief, whereas with Al, everything this guy touches turns into shit. So that a couple of jackasses online can get mad at me for seeing this coming a mile away, years in advance.
The only tragedy is that there's not much left of what used to be the Haymonites, the guys who used to swear by him. Kinda like how there's not much left of the Spence Tards or the Wilderettes.
For this glorious I told you so moment, you'll be hard-pressed to find Haymonites in the same abundance that you used to in the YTBC, other online spaces. And what Haymonites remain likely will pretend they weren't the ones defending him, because they don't want to admit that they're wrong.
Yeah, they're really fucking childish like that.
You attack guys like us for calling Al Haymon a con man, so when it turns out he actually is a con man, you still don't want to admit you're wrong. An overall waste of air. Waste of space.
Waste of time, which is why I don't often mince words with these people these days. According to Rick, Al Haymon has settled with Floyd out of court to testify against Stephan Espinoza and Showtime.
Glimmer of light at the end of the tunnel for what is Floyd Mayweather's lawsuit that I initially thought wouldn't get him any money. That in all likelihood, the money he's looking for, it's already gone.
Stephan doesn't have it.
So? It must be Showtime's money that he's after, and I think it's going to be difficult proving that Showtime had any hand in Al and Stephan stealing your money. How does that make Showtime culpable?
Wasn't Stephan working for Showtime?
Yeah, he was, but the consequences of his actions doesn't make them culpable. It's not RICO law.
I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Men's light heavyweight news, Callum Smith versus David Morrell deal reached. Once again, purse bid has been cancelled. The teams of Callum Smith and David Morrell have once again found common ground. WBO officials confirmed that a purse bid hearing scheduled for Monday had been cancelled, satisfied with the communication from all parties involved regarding the ordered interim light heavyweight title fight. No further details were offered, such as a date or location.
Yeah, Callum Smith wasn't at liberty to walk away from this thing because David is his mandatory, so close to fighting for the full WBO title. In order to keep his spot, he's got to take care of this guy first.
WBO acknowledges receipt of written confirmation from Matchroom Boxing and Warriors Boxing, PBC. WBO President Gustavo Olivieri announced on Monday, "We have a deal in place and the event date is secured. Purse bid is hereby cancelled. Announcement is forthcoming." Liverpool's Smith is the current WBO secondary title holder and is promoted by Matchroom Boxing. Morrell, represented by Warriors Boxing on behalf of PBC, messages left separately with each were not immediately returned as this goes to publication. Whenever the fight takes place, Smith will be looking at an inactive period well past 1 year. The former WBA super middleweight champion has not fought since a February 2025 points win over countryman Joshua Buatsi in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, effectively halting any momentum he amassed from that fight, which is often the case when it comes to Callum.
The guy's good. He just doesn't fight often enough.
With the win, Smith claimed an interim version of the WBO title that Dmitry Bivol regained along with the lineal WBC, IBF, and WBO titles in his majority decision win over Artur Beterbiev in that show's main event. Avenged his lone career defeat in the process, but also has not fought since that night. He has since parted ways with the WBC title, but still holds the rest of the divisional hardware, including the primary version of the WBO title. Smith's inactivity is largely in part to the constant stops and starts in this same matchup. He and Morrell were first ordered to begin negotiations last July, shortly after Morrell's narrow win over Imam Katayev in Queens, New York. So this has been going on since the summer of last year.
Sheesh.
David Morrell previously held secondary versions of the WBA title at 168 and at light heavyweight. The latter was conceded in a 12-round unanimous decision loss to David Benavidez last February 1st in Las Vegas, Nevada. Once this bout crosses the finish line, the winner will become Bivol's WBO mandatory challenger. However, the IBF and WBA remain ahead in the line, further calling into question the point of an interim title, particularly given its inactivity.
Dmitry Bivol is rumored to be facing his IBF mandatory challenger next in Michael Eifert.
And then via the WBA, you have David Benavidez holding a WBA regular title, Venezuela's Albert Ramirez holding an interim title, you have former champion Artur Beterbiev ranked at number 1.
Dmitry Bivol's next fight after the Eifert fight could come against any one of those three guys. Most think it's gonna come against Artur.
What that essentially means is, for as long as it's taken to put together Morrell versus Smith, they're not on the eve of that Bivol fight. Whoever wins the fight between them likely won't get their crack at the apple until next year.
Wow.
Now, as far as the fight between them, I initially favored Callum Smith to win the fight against David Morrell based on how Callum looked with Joshua Buatsi and how David looked with Imam Katayev, but now that Callum has been out for so long and he will be shaking off ring rust in this fight, it's in the air.
That in tandem with David Morrell's new corner situation, he has since dropped Ronnie Shields and replaced him with Ismael Salas, who I have a much higher opinion of.
And I think his philosophy gels a lot better with a Cuban fighter like David Morrell than Ronnie's philosophy, which I don't even know what it is.
It's an upgrade.
From Ronnie Shields to Ismael Salas, that is an upgrade for David Morrell, who on that predication may come back better than he's been looking. So now, calling this fight, it's a bit difficult.
We'll talk more about it once it's officially announced and as that fight date approaches.